Okay. Yesterday we did a cold plunge, and I feel like this feels a little bit similar to a cold plunge. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. If we haven't met yet, my name is Ashley Enns. I've been around Southridge since my family moved to the Niagara region back in the year 2000. If you are in or have a child in grade 6 through grade 12, you might recognize me because I'm the lucky one who gets to hang out with our junior and senior youth students as the youth pastor.
And I am Aaron Enns. I'm the lucky one who gets to be married to Ashley Joy. I've been here since we got married 12 years ago. I may look familiar to the introverts around here because I'm the bad guy who makes you greet your neighbors in the morning. And if you're extroverted like me, then you're just happy to talk. We have 3 children. They're beautiful. They are wild, and they are on occasion difficult. Just on occasion, though. Like this morning when they were like almost fist fighting as worship was going on. Yeah, that was ours shouting. Anyways, you've seen them there. You've seen them eating leftovers from the communion. That's who they are. Yeah. We've been invited this morning to share a part of our story. And I just want to say up front that it will sound scripted, and that's because it is. We have spent a lot of time refining what we want to share because there is so much we could go on about through the journey we've been on, and we just want to avoid untethered paths of thought. So I hope that you'll hear our hearts, even if at times it doesn't shine through our nerves. This is very close to us.
So to catch you up, I've been battling breast cancer for almost a year. It started back in June of 2023 when I found a lump and was immediately worried. I went in for an ultrasound, and at the time they said it simply looked like a cyst. Nothing urgent, they'd just keep an eye on it with ultrasounds once every 6 months. By June of 2024, I had accepted the role of youth pastor here at Southridge. It wasn't a position I had been actively chasing. In fact, it kind of surprised me when it first came up. But as I prayed and wrestled with it, I had this deep sense that God was leading me into it. I was so excited to step into this new role. I felt ready and a little nervous to take on such a huge honor and responsibility like speaking into the lives of teenagers. I had a vision for what youth ministry could be. I already knew how amazing our students and youth leaders are, and I genuinely felt like God had positioned me for this moment. So when the news came that they wanted to follow up my routine ultrasound with a biopsy, those 2 parts of my life collided in a really jarring way. On August 15th, I was called into a room for my biopsy. It was the first time I found out they were checking 3 different spots, not just the lump that I had originally felt. And I knew in that moment this most likely wasn't going to be nothing. I started to spiral. I couldn't stop panicking. I felt vulnerable and scared and alone. I could not shake the surging feeling that it's not supposed to be this way. And then the nurse, whose name I don't even remember, grabbed and held my hand. She looked me in the eyes and gently said, "We're going to do this one step at a time, one day at a time." It didn't fix anything, but it changed something. I was still scared, but I wasn't alone anymore. That simple act of kindness reminded me I was being held, not just by her, but by God. It's amazing how one small gesture, someone holding your hand, can break through fear. In that moment, I didn't just feel seen by a nurse, I felt seen by God. Like David poetically reminds us in Psalm 139, verses 7 to 10. "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast."
Yeah, thinking back to the morning of the biopsy, transparently, I remember myself distracting myself on my phone with work emails, kind of my go-to get out of the moment kind of thing. And I just sat in the waiting room doing that while Ash had the procedure. At the time, I didn't know there were 3 spots, and Ashley had learned it. And while I was still very hopeful that this was just part of, like the biopsy was just part of the routine check-ins, I sat there waiting. I'm not a jump to conclusions kind of person, and I just rationalize most things until they're proven to be not so good, so I am generally pretty good at keeping a positive outlook. I recall the weeks leading up to the biopsy being more of a time where I was trying to be sure to help Ash manage her anxiety while not allowing myself believe this was more than a cyst. Rationally, Ash was only 33. The idea of cancer at that age was simply nonsense. I remember when the nurse for the biopsy came out to get me in the waiting room. She came out and said, "Ashley has been so brave and so tough, but I think she needs you right now." My heart sank. That moment was the lowest of my life so far. Immediately, my head rushed into the frenzy of fear. What does this mean? How could something like this happen to someone so young? How in a period of Ashley's life, when things were seemingly starting to align, could something so imperfect jump in and steal what felt like a stride led by Jesus? Sorry. A lot changed in that moment, and my heart was screaming, it's not supposed to be this way. I followed the nurse to the room and joined my visibly heartbroken wife. I remember wiping her tears as they finished the biopsy, and as that sweet nurse continued to share her love and kindness.
From that room, we drove straight home and wept. Who am I kidding? I was crying long before we left the hospital, but continued to at home. Questions were ping-ponging around in our heads. If it was cancer, what stage was I at? How would we possibly tell our kids? What would it mean for my job and the students adjusting to change once again? Would I lose all my hair? Would I recover from this, or was it giving me a timeline? All the unknowns that come with a cancer battle. We prayed for a miracle, that somehow these were still cysts. I could envision the relief it would be to hear that it wasn't cancer. What a new lease we would have on life. The next week, we heard our doctors say the word we feared. Unfortunately, it is cancer. We held each other's hands. We cried some more. We had 1,000 more questions for the doctors and for God. After a month filled with doctor's appointments, scans, tests, and consults, all trying to establish a plan of action, it was finally my turn to start chemotherapy. I remember sitting in the chair for the first time, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines and other patients at different stages in their own battles. Everything felt surreal. I watched as the bright red chemo dripped into my veins for the first time. It felt like something out of a movie, only it wasn't. This was my body, my life, my story. And I sat there trying to take it all in. I thought once again, it's not supposed to be this way. Not at 33. Not when my kids were still so little. Not when I had just started a new job I felt called to. Not when I was trying to step into life with boldness and with joy. This wasn't part of the plan, our plan. And honestly, I don't think it was God's original plan either. That day in the chemo chair, I was full of fear. I didn't feel strong or brave or even particularly faithful. But what I did feel eventually was held. Held by God's presence, even if it was quiet. Even if it didn't answer all of my questions. Even there, your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. And that even there is what gave me just enough courage to cling to Jesus.
Journeying through those initial rounds of chemo from September to January was tough. and in part only the start, though at the time we weren't terribly aware of that being only the start. Then came the first of several surgeries, the start and completion of radiation, and Ash has started and is currently undergoing maintenance chemotherapy, which will take us to the end of this year. Now we're navigating how she'll be treated for the next 5 years. It's really been so much, and the end, unfortunately, isn't yet in sight.
Throughout this journey, I found myself constantly trying to prepare for the next 17 steps, hoping that if I anticipate everything, nothing will catch me off guard. Yet every time something changes, and I'm overwhelmed all over again. After wrestling through the emotional weight of each change, I'm gently brought back to the present. Back to the reality that all I truly have is today, and that God is holding me through it. He's been right beside me in every moment. I believe God grieves with me, grieves the diagnosis and all that it has brought, and mourns that the world is not as it was meant to be. Even there, in my questions and wrestling and sorrow, God's hand will guide me. His right hand will hold me fast.
This has been the most challenging year of my life, both practically and spiritually. One of the toughest parts for me has been the total loss of control. I love to know what's coming, and I love to work as hard as necessary to change it if it's not looking good. Not an option in this. I can't fix this for Ash, and I can't take away her pain. I can't make the treatments easier or the fear go away. But here's some transparency. What sometimes feels worse than the total loss of control practically is that I actually choose to believe in someone, Jesus, who I really do think has the power to change it all. Yet this is where my greatest spiritual challenge lies. How, why, does our all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly loving God hold our hands but not change our circumstances? How come I cry and pray and cry and pray, and yet after each day after the next just seems unchanged? I don't have the answer to these. These are questions I ask every single day. And it's not sometimes in humility. Sometimes it's just, I'm pissed. Oh, sorry for saying that. That wasn't in the script. Oh, crap. This is what happens. Anyways, still in the confusion, miss my doubts, and especially during my frustrated times, cry-yelling work van prayers, I'm reminded that even there, in my anger, my frustration, when I'm pissed, God's hand will guide me, and God's hand will hold me fast. God does not leave me alone, feeling like it's not supposed to be this way.
Many of us may know that feeling. The deep ache that whispers, it's not supposed to be this way. You don't need a cancer diagnosis to understand that kind of pain. It's all around us. Internationally, we witness terrifying wars, injustice, natural disasters, and displacement. Within our own country, we grapple with the painful legacy and ongoing mistreatment of our Indigenous neighbors, as well as deep political division, often accompanied by anger and hatred. In our local communities, we feel the weight of a rising cost of living and increasing loneliness. Within our families, there are strained relationships, fertility struggles, and the heartbreaking loss of loved ones gone far too soon. And within ourselves, we face the silent battles: addiction, mental health challenges, and insecurity. I don't know about you, but to me, hearing that list and knowing that it's just scratching the surface of the pain in the world feels very overwhelming. It feels too big.
And we all know that sadly this isn't something new. This has been going on for all of time. And as I've thought back on our journey over this last year, I've been drawn to a few stories from the Bible of encounters with Jesus. In Jesus' story, we see people who also felt like life wasn't supposed to be this way. It's in the heartbroken woman at a well, yearning to be purely seen. It's in a furious disciple, Peter, slicing at a servant's ear in defense of his beloved friend. It's two sisters struck with grief at the death of their brother who passed far too soon. It's a sick woman desperately reaching for healing. And then it's Jesus himself facing betrayal, pain, and ultimately death on the cross. But that moment, the cross, is the great redemption cry of Jesus, reaching around all of us, holding us in a perfect embrace to say, I didn't design it to be this way, and I'll do anything to make it right again. This idea of being held has been our recurring theme through the journey. We can't fix the pain, we can't solve mental health or wars or cure cancer, but we can hold people through their pain and heartbreak in the same way Jesus has held others. Like when he broke the social, religious, and cultural norms to speak with the heartbroken woman at the well, showing her that she is known. Or when he bridged the gap between Peter and the servant, holding both of them in different ways, crossing boundaries to do it. When Jesus joined Mary and Martha in their weeping, he was empathetically holding them with his tears to say, it's not supposed to be this way. When Jesus' clothing was touched by the sick woman, she wasn't scolded, but welcomed and even celebrated for her faith by Jesus as he turned to see her chasing after him. As I digested the connection of Jesus' celebration of the sick woman in pursuit of the touch of his garment, I couldn't help but feel the most parallel to this small story. Many days through this journey, it feels like I'm reaching with any strength I have left, but the garment of Jesus is just out of reach. Even though it feels that way to me, my hope is that one day I'll more clearly see that Jesus' face has been turned to us all along, celebrating that even in this challenging walk, our faith has carried us through and has been keeping us more whole than we might even feel.
We think a big reason why we're able to continue that pursuit of Jesus through all of this is because we have been held so lovingly by so many, by friends, family, and even strangers who showed up with meals and gifts, from skip the dishes to homemade gingerbread decorating for the kids to do at Christmas. Those all took the weight off of meal planning and prepping off of us and added some fun to those long weeks of chemo. With texts like, I'm going to Costco this morning, what can I pick up for you? Or, I'm just checking in, how is your heart doing? Or, here's a song that reminds me of you in this season. These all reminded us that we were not forgotten, even when we couldn't be part of our communities like we would want to be. Practical offers of babysitting and rides to treatments were always so appreciated that others would take time out of their day to come alongside us. And most often, offering prayers, knowing that there were others holding us up in prayer, even when we had run out of words, felt like a beautiful picture of community. We've been held by a group of friends who have listened when we only had worries to offer them, always responding with understanding and encouragement. We've been reminded again and again, we are not alone. In our brokenness, we are held. And that's what we want to remind you of today. If you're here this morning and you feel like life is not the way it's supposed to be, if you're sitting in your own uncertainty, disappointment, or grief, if you feel like you're drowning in questions that don't have answers, we want to look you in the eye and say, you are not alone. We're going to do this one step at a time, one day at a time. Let's be the kind of people who show up for each other in the hard stuff. Let's be the ones who grab a hand, who sit in the silence, who say, I can't fix this, but I'm not going anywhere. Because the truth is, we can't always take away each other's pain. We can't change the diagnosis or mend the heartbreak or undo the loss, but we can carry it together. We can refuse to let anyone walk through it alone. Let's be a community that reminds each other that even in the darkest of places, even in the it's not supposed to be this way moments, we are still held by a God who hasn't let go, held by a God who grieves with us, sits with us, and walks beside us, held by a love deeper and more faithful than we can imagine. We are held. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Even there, your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. Even there, even now, even in this.
Let's pray together. Jesus, sometimes the things we go through feel like way more than we can bear. There are just so many things that we observe and experience that make us feel like it can't have been designed to be this way. I'm grateful that when the pain is deep, you've shown us examples of how you tenderly love your children while they're in that pain. Though we recognize that only you have the power to truly fix things, we also realize that you've chosen to use us as vessels in sharing your love and kindness. Help us to see the needs of others in the ways you were able to, so your love might be experienced through us as we support them. Ultimately, Jesus, we thank you for being sure that there are no corners we can hide, no distance we can run, and no doubts or frustrations that can separate us from your loving embrace. And we pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.